Welcome to Poetry Palace TV. I am Tom Beal. I am the poet of Diary of a Poet, which the TV show is about. I was asked to do this by several people who have read the volume 18 of the series, which is to my late wife. It's called Internal Revolutions. 4 days from this taping is the anniversary of the 4th year since she passed. And I have yet to be able to read that book. But it was suggested that I start you at the beginning of my series and work my way into it, and maybe by then I'll be much more prepared to read the emotionally rough stuff. This is collected works from 2014. At one point along the way, I tried to sell poetry on the streets. I originally typed onto masters for a spirit duplicator you put alcohol in and tried to get 100 copies out of a run. I originally sold 100 copies at South Willow Street, Sunoco, by the cinemas in Manchester in 1986. It'd be amazing if one of you had one of those books. I no longer have one. But so I wrote 8,000 poems to get that first book, which is called Just Scribbled Words, Volume 1. I was brought up in a minister's house, little outside of society, no radio, no television at the beginning, and I thought I could grow up and be a poet. I thought that was like an option. Maybe it was, maybe I missed the mark, but I had my 8,000 poems and I wrote them into 5 subject notebooks, and I ended up with 2,500 poems, and I was ready to take it to the world. And fortunately, I was smart enough to get a red pen, and I went back through those notebooks and put X's through poems. Just Scribbled Words has 84 poems in it. And I am so grateful that I took the time to edit a little bit more and come up with stuff that, you know what, I mean, I'm 62 this year. I see a poem here and there that I wish maybe I hadn't put in there, but it's not bad for the fact that it was done at 23 years old. I just turned 24 to start to sell it. So that's how that came about. I moved to Maine. Volume 2 is a pink one because it's a month with Marie. Volume 3 is green. Someone else did Volume 3. I had 2 volumes I was going to throw away. And they said, why don't you give them to me and I'll put one together. What a blessing that was, because I have a book of poetry that someone else chose the poems for. You know, so I don't feel anything about whether the poem should or should not be in the book. It was their book, you know, like I wrote the stuff, but they did it. Volume 4 is a little touchy. It's an affirmation book I wrote after finding out I might need some recovery from certain things, and then it goes on. I stopped writing in the 90s for the most part. I had volumes 5 through 12 ready to go, and I believe it was my quantity stage. And in 2001, I believe it was, my sister was a proofreader at a publisher in Ohio. And they said they would do a paperback of the best of series. I get to choose. When I did that, my grandmother was a Baptist minister's wife in northern New England, and I tried to go with poems she was be proud of. And when I got to those 8 volumes, only 11 poems made it into that book. But I used the numbers, so I retired those volumes. And they also wanted me to be a writing poet. I hadn't written in a decade. So I went back to writing. I had just got online, and there were chat rooms where you could go, and one of them was Versatility, long, long gone. They had a gentleman that did a newsletter, like The Muse, one poem you'll get to later in the show. They had him do a newsletter. It was 10 pages long about the whole history of the Muse. And it was insane on how much knowledge he would put into a 10-page newsletter. And then I would get home from work, I read that, and then I would have to write a poem. And this poem is, I don't know, 50 lines long. And then go to the group and you get to read it. And that was a fun reintroduction, you know, and then I started the original Poetry Palace gift shop. I was trying to publish people around the world. And it was just not much of a publishing deal. You got 20 copies of your book and 50% anyone bought anything. And not many people bought anything, but I wrote checks. I had a bank account, Poetry Palace Gift Shop, and I wrote checks to these poets, and every poet got at least one check. And I'm not sure if half of them cashed it. So I think those checks are framed somewhere in the world, you know? And that was nice. I mean, it was an international thing. I don't know if it was even legal, to tell you the truth. But, you know, I sent some to Africa and England and, you know, different places, Canada. A lady from Canada actually edited volume 16 of the same title. And then somewhere along the line, I decided selling poetry wasn't my thing. I think I read Kirpal Singh from India, and he thought if you had a talent, you should just give it away. His books are not copywritten. He's long gone, but his books are not copywritten. He's long gone, but I was living in Meredith when I was born. I was born in Laconia. We lived in Meredith. He visited his American assistant's farm in Sandborton, 22 miles away, when I was 3 months old. I just thought that was weird. So anyway, I bought a laser printer and I decided I would print up all my books. And they came out in different colors. I have no idea why. Maybe just so I'd have to print with different colors, and it made it a little harder to make my books. But this is only copy number 104, so I haven't made a lot of them, but they are floating around the world because I gave them away when my wife and I went on cruises. So they're around here and there, and I had the littler books. I used to make the blue one. They all folded in the middle. They were stapled with the cover, and my late wife had to have her picture on the back of them, and I'm not even sure she read all of them, but she got what she wanted, you know, because she was awesome, and that's probably why she has a volume 18. And that hit 1,000 poems in November of 22. On the website, I write a poem in the morning. I wrote a poem this morning before I came in to her. By the time I get to the computer, I post a poem that's just about 3 months old. Then I post a feature poem from one of the books. There's 9 of them here. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but altogether, there's 11. Her book is now part of that circulation. So 1 out of every 11 days, I post a poem that I wrote earlier. I wrote a poem, I post a poem, and I post a poem that I wrote 4 years ago, or 3, you know, whatever it might be. And I get quite a bit from that. From, you know, the therapeutic value of that is, I can't even explain it, you know, but I get to see how I'm moving along, you know. I mean, the one I wrote this morning is about having a TV show, because I never done this before, you know, and I like to pretend I'm talking to her, you know, and that seems to help. But you know, my DJ at karaoke read this stuff. He said, "That's awesome. You ought to try to get it out to people." So here I am. I'm trying to get it out to people. I'm not sure how that will go, but you know, so we have volume 1, 2, 3, and 4. Voracious verse excerpts is 5. Then we have 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And we're probably going to take this whole year to get through those. And then hopefully next year, we'll start on volume 18, Internal Revolutions. And that already has well over 1,400 poems. So next year, it's going to be close to 18, you know. And we'll just see how that goes. And I hope you like it. And I have written up a little bit of an introduction, and then next week we'll just start right in on volume 1. So the reason the show exists is so that eventually we get to volume 18, Internal Revolutions, a title a widow's friend suggested. It is a book of poems I am writing to my late wife. It took me a couple weeks to get started, but since early February 2020, I have written a poem almost every day. There have been days I have not been able to post them on my site, and it took a little while to get the site going, so I am posting poems that are about 85 days into the irretrievable past. As of November 22, when her volume reached 1,000 poems, her Internal Revolutions became part of the rotation of the feature poems of this series, so that each 11 days I not only get to see what I wrote almost 3 months prior, but 3 years prior as well. My hope, as well as those suggesting I make this show, is that it can also be beneficial for you to go through this with me. On Diary of a Poet volumes page of the site, listed below my name, was written and has been updated. Dear reader, this volume was released out of order without poem numbers. They have been given their numbers now because volume 17 was still being created. Originally, this was intended to be released as a video blog of poems to the Queen, Little Linda May Beal, my wife, who just passed in January of this year, 2020, the year of the rat and the subsequent plague. But after finding a poem I had written the day after she left her body and trying to read it, I realized that it would be quite some time before I'd be able to read them with any sort of composed manner. So I try to post one each day early on the real PoetryPalaceGiftShop.com site and move her prior posting to the Poetry Palace TV page. And then once a week, I move 7 of them to her site. And then they get pictures, one of the other benefits of posting online. Still writing and posting poems, 6 April 21. Still writing and posting poems, 8 January 22. Still writing and posting poems, 8 January 23. Still writing and posting poems, 8 January 24. I may have to finish this posthumously. Sorry, you won't see it. Sincerely, Tom. Then I found I had fans all around me. One day, the guy running the karaoke show I go to in the winter when I'm laid off and has become a good friend came up to me and said, I read that for a couple hours the other night, and that's awesome. People who have lost a loved one, a spouse may benefit from reading that. And he wrote up a little something. For those who still enjoy reading, I would recommend these poems, Diary of a Poet, Volume 18, Internal Revolutions. Tom Beal writes about the loss of his wife and the grief, and in some cases, healing he is experiencing. These poems are written almost like a journal in real time. For those who have experienced similar loss, I think these verses would especially benefit you. I enjoy reading them and hope you will too. My friend Phil, worst DJ ever on Facebook. And a few quotes and a message from the producer. She gets the daily post from Poetry Palace TV and a feature poem texted to her phone because producers get special benefits. You never cease to amaze how these words come together with seemingly no effort on your part. The love he has for his wife gives you such good feelings and makes you smile. He takes you on a journey of a tortured soul with the most heart-wrenchingly beautiful way. Dear television audience, I have never really paid too much attention to poetry, but beautiful words have always touched my heart. Until recently, the only poet on my landscape was Maya Angelou, who I absolutely love. But I stumbled upon another less-known poet whose poems have helped me through the grief of losing my husband in 2020. I had no idea that this poet, Tom Beal, had lost his spouse as well. His poems to his wife before and after she passed are so relatable. What he does and how he feels is exactly what happens to all who have lost someone. And seemingly, with no effort, his words have a way of soothing our common thread of sadness. I think people will find solace hearing how he explains all his thoughts and feelings so beautifully. And tenderness of those words will find their way into their grieving hearts. Each poem is a step in the healing process. It has been for me. They tend to create a calming effect on my emotions. Georgia Marquis, Nashua, New Hampshire. And then this is a critique on Volume 1, Just Scribbled Words, which will be next week's show. We'll start that. It may take a month to get through. I had just put the site up, and this is a man I knew up in Manchester, and he emailed me this. Thomas Beal's Diary of a Poet, Volume 1, Just Scribbled Words, is brimming with the emotions of life. He displays the hardships of nature in a way that never lets your heart lose track of its beauty. This collection of poems will take you down a road of love, pain, perseverance, and the ever so appropriate dose of Mr. Beal's Heart on My Sleeve. Anthony Clisby, Manchester, New Hampshire. I do hope that over this next year we can find some things that touch your heart in this book of poetry I have, and then get ready to read the volume to my late wife to you. And thank you very much. Like I said, if you would like to read at a different pace, you can go to PoetryPalaceGiftShop.com. All of this is there to read for free. And I thank you for coming, and I hope to see you next week. Au revoir.